Hey, welcome back. This is Baseball 101 with Darin Cissell. Thanks for joining us again this week. It's our third episode. Hopefully you've had a chance to watch the first couple. Last week we talked with Jerry Daniels about kind of the history of club baseball and give you an idea kind of what the original mission behind club baseball was supposed to be. And Jerry will actually be back next week, and we're going to talk about the current club vision for some of the different clubs with development and recruiting. And hopefully he can clarify kind of what some of those things mean, because it's a little vague when they say we're here to develop a player. Well, what does that mean? There's a lot of different aspects of it. So Jerry's going to come back next week. We're going to have that conversation and hopefully explain some of that to you guys. Today, we're going a little different direction, and it's one I'm very excited about. Tim Blankenship is with me today, and we're going to be going through some of the things he's been dealing with. He's a parent currently of a sixth grader. Asher's in sixth grade, correct? Yes. Right. So Asher's in sixth grade playing for the Gators, and just talking through some of the things that he's experienced and adjustments that he's having to make as he goes through it, and really conversations I brought up on the first episode of trying to set boundaries. And I think it's a tough conversation to have, especially when you're in the middle of it. So Tim was able to come in today to talk about those things. So just a little background about Tim, and I'll let him kind of explain that. But obviously, he has a background in sports, obvious to me, not you, because you don't know Tim. I do, so let's clarify that. Tim is going to explain what his background is. So you want to talk a little bit about your background?
Sure, yeah. Thanks for having me. We've had this type of conversation for several years now, it feels like. And so, yeah, first and foremost, I'm here because I'm a dad currently in this situation with youth sports. I have an occupation other than being a dad. I'm an optometrist. I see patients 5 days a week, 4 days a week in an office setting and full-time job, and try to figure out and navigate through the youth sports culture. My background as an athlete, I grew up in rural southeast Missouri, and small school, small area. The high school that I grew up going to had two sports for boys. It was baseball and basketball. Girls sports had three, so they got one more than we did.
Title IX.
It didn't kick in, I guess. But so they had volleyball, softball, and basketball. And so, which put us in an interesting position because we were too small to have football, didn't have track. And so basketball was obviously winter, baseball was obviously spring. And so in the fall, to give the boys something to do, they did have fall baseball for these small schools that did not have football in the fall. So it wasn't all the schools in the area, but we had a little conference, and you'd play an end of the year tournament. So grew up playing both of those. No club. Played some American Legion ball. That was the extent of travel baseball for me. Fortunate enough to go on and play some Division II basketball at UMSL, and had a fun time doing that, which kind of led me into wanting my kids to be around sports.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting coming from a small town, and then you get here in the environment and culture of youth sports, and it's much bigger than it was when I was growing up here. I can't imagine coming from the small town, rural town of 200 to this situation and trying to navigate and make those decisions.
Yeah, that was really a culture shock for my wife and I. So she played all three sports. We went to the same high school sweethearts, and so she grew up playing those three sports. And to get involved, it was pretty simple. The flyer came home at school, and you were put on a team with all of your classmates. So not only did you know every kid on your team, you likely knew every kid on the other team that you were playing against, because you would spend that time at recess with them, right? And so you knew when the signups were, you knew how to get to the practices, you knew the coaches that were coaching them, the parents that were leading the programs, and so it was definitely a system shock to try to come in here and navigate that.
Information overload, because
yes,
the amount, and you just don't have Asher, obviously. Obvious to me again, you don't know, but you have 3 kids and they all play multiple sports.
Right. Yeah. So I have 2 daughters and then a son. So Karis is my oldest. She's 17. She's a junior at Timberland High School. And then I've got Eden, who's 14, an 8th grader at Winsville South Middle. And then Asher's in 6th grade. And they all play sports, and they play multiple sports. Both girls play volleyball and basketball. We couldn't get a softball player out of either one of them, so we tried.
Sad.
And then Asher plays football, baseball, and basketball.
So you got 3 kids all playing multiple sports, and then you're trying to manage the club and high school. How tough is it to balance all that within just your schedule?
Yeah, it's nearly impossible to balance the schedule. Like there's the financial side of things that these sports cost a lot, but on top of that, there's the scheduling, which is probably more impactful than anything. Is try to balance a couple practices for a couple different sports, plus games, and trying to say, okay, well, we're going to really focus on this sport this season. But then that carries on into trickles into the other season, or maybe continues on throughout the year. So it's really hard on scheduling.
I would think so. I mean, I have 2 kids. My daughter played sports a little, and then I had Ty that played just 2 sports. So you're up for Dad of the Year for trying to balance all that stuff. But was there at any point, have you almost encouraged them to specialize in one, or is it?
Yeah, we've certainly had that conversation, and you look at a lot of our friends or some of the parents that we're in with. There's definitely a draw towards specializing, because then you can at least narrow it down to making your schedule a little bit more sane. I am still in the camp that I think there's value in having a multi-sport athlete at the age of 12.
Yes.
I don't know that it makes sense to specialize in anything at the age of 12. And so I'm pushing back against that, but at the detriment of my own schedule. Am I doing that?
Yeah. And that, especially when you're playing 3 different sports, and unfortunately there is just not a season for baseball, for football, and basketball anymore. So, like when you talk about, some coaches talk about commitment within, if you really want to play a high level, you have to be committed and play fall ball and play all this stuff. Like, how do you manage that sort of balancing act of, like, your son wants to play 3 sports, there's all these expectations and all these things that he's supposed to be doing, but you can't be at everything.
No, you can't. And this is part of our conversation. And I grew up in an era and in a location that I was taught to be, committed to a team.
Yeah.
You would be there at everything, every game, every practice. Sometimes you're not feeling well, you would still be there, because that was how you would show up for your teammates. And so this is definitely a different mindset, because it is just physically impossible to be at 2 places at the same time. So, and there are multiple nights or days where there are 2 things going on at one time. So that's been a shift in our thinking and how we try to navigate through this commitment level of being a part of a multi-sport athlete in a multi-kid family that likes to play these sports.
So when you have coaches that are disappointed because you're not at something, have they ever questioned kind of the commitment level?
By and large, most of the coaches we have are parents themselves, and whether they have a multi-sport athlete or not, I feel like most of the coaches we've had have been gracious and understanding that as you said, they'll tell us, we have 1 kid that's doing these. I can't imagine having 3 doing it at that level, and so we've been extended some grace with our schedules on that. But in the same token, my wife and I joke about this all the time, that we will sacrifice our own family time to make it where these kids can be at these other events that maybe it shouldn't be possible, but we're trying everything to make it work where they can be at two things at once.
Yeah, and that's when you have that many things going on the schedule, and then you're also trying to balance the family vacations and all the other stuff. I mean, you run out of time. Like there's just
Correct.
not. So something has to give, and some balancing act of really comes down to you got to figure out what's the most important and then start making decisions from there. And I think that's the tough part because you want to give everything to your kid. Like obviously, I wanted my son to be happy. He wants to play this. I want to give it to him. He wants I want it to make them happy, but at the same time, I had to step back and figure out what was best for them first. And I think that's where it's a lot easier for me because I'm able to see the conversations with the high school kids once they get there and realize, wow, they didn't need all that, but other people don't have access to those conversations, which I had a couple of those today, and there were kids going, I don't know why I'm playing fall ball. I don't want to play fall ball. And I'm like, well, stop. Well, what else would I do? Which scared me because honestly, if you're so attached to just being busy with baseball and that's kind of your identity, that's a scary side of it where, okay, when you're done playing at 22, well, now what? Like if you don't have something else going on in your life where, hey, you have the weekend off, what are you going to do? And it's like, well, what do I do without baseball? You really need to think about maybe there's more to this life that you can be doing than just hitting a ball and go enjoy life. There's other things out there. There's a whole world. Explore. Some people go with their family on vacations that not linked to sports, even like Branson or Ozarks, or you'll figure it out. Find a map. That's what paper used to be. Sorry. Sometimes I go back to teacher mode on that. My bad. Anyway, let's figure out where the heck I was at. I just got lost on a map that I drew. So it's killing me. So one of the questions I know I've dealt with before with other parents, and it's clear to me because I've talked to so many people, but like parents continue to sacrifice so much of their family time, vacations, money, all that they sacrifice a lot. And I'm like, to me, like, why are you sacrificing so much for something? And it seems like people are aware that it's too much, but they're afraid to stop it. Like, why do you think people are so hesitant to like set boundaries?
Yeah, that's a loaded question.
Yes, it is. That's why you're answering, not me.
The boundaries question is something that I continue to ask myself and try to get better at myself. So I'm by no means an expert. I've had multiple conversations with you to help me hone in some boundaries, but still trying to work on that. But the thought of why do we continue to do what we kind of are, I think most people are generally aware that this seems like a broken system.
Yeah.
And why do we continue to go down this path of a broken system? There's I think multiple answers to that. I think that there's a fear-based answer that says, well, if I don't do it, then my child may fall behind. From my experience, the two club sports that are most similar in my experience of the sports that my kids play would be volleyball and baseball. And my oldest daughter, starting in 6th grade, was when she transitioned from a little CYC team that she was playing on with most of her school friends, went to a club volleyball experience. And she was kind of left behind in that experience, not put on the same team as her friends that she was playing CYC with. And it felt as if she was left behind in that. And I get it. So when that same year, that was her 6th grade year, that was my youngest son's 1st grade year, that's when we came out of playing in a little league coach pitch rec baseball league that summer, and there were already lots of families that were already talking about playing for a club situation, and my first thought was, if we don't jump in early, then we might be left behind.
Yeah.
And for some of these skill level sports, that could be a big deal. And then how do you catch up later on? And so I think the fear base of being left behind or not being able to catch up later on is a big part of that. I think that we continue to follow this herd because it has become a social gathering. It's become a community. Like this is where people are finding belonging.
Connection.
Yeah. They want their kids to be around other kids that are somewhat like-minded. And so if you get a group of kids who are pretty well focused and want to get better at a certain sport or whatever, then that's the kids you want your kid to be around. And so, you kind of start hanging out with those families, and then that's where now the vacations become going to an out-of-town tournament,
going to Grand Park together,
swimming at the Holiday Inn hotel pool, right? Like that becomes the family vacation because of that social gathering and community involvement. And then lastly, I think for the third piece on this is similar. I think there are many parents who would say, I need my kids involved in this club sport, and I want them so active that there is no other downtime to get into something that maybe they shouldn't, right? Yeah. And so I hear that a lot where at least if they're at practice or they could be doing lots worse, right?
I know where they're at.
And so I think that's, for me, the three things that stick out is why we continue to do what we're doing, even though we feel like it's a broken system.
And that's what I think, and I've compared it to a stampede to a degree. I mean, it's literally, I feel like the stampede started a while ago, and you had a bunch of people running out of fear of being left behind, being left off teams, whatever it is. At some point, you're running from nothing. You're just running to run because everyone else is running. So, well, if they're running, I must be running. There's something to be afraid of. And that's what hopefully we can start to ease the fears. And I know we talked last year at one of Asher's football games, and just reminding you of, like, it's going to be okay. Like, it's Asher, I've seen Asher play. He's a good athlete. He's going to be fine. And that's what I think that conversation, I know we've talked a little bit, that was helpful, or at least in some way beneficial, that you heard, like, hey, you can set boundaries and you have a choice in kind of how much you're going to be involved and what you're going to be able to do. So, like, from that conversation just last year at the football game, like, how did that help you begin to set boundaries, or at least reevaluate what you were doing?
Yeah, there were two pivotal conversations that we had for me. Certainly the one at the football game, and the timing of that was right for my family as well. And so I get that each kid is different. Each family is going to have different expectations, needs, all of those things. But the timing was really good at that conversation. We had just come off of, that we'll get into a little bit later, but we had come off of a season where it was really, really long, and there was struggle and
we're talking
failure.
About his fifth grade season.
Fifth grade.
A long fifth grade. We can talk about, not like, when you say long, what did fifth grade season look like? It's fifth grade.
So 79 games for that fifth grade season. So 55 in the spring, 24 in the fall.
That's a lot of games.
It's a lot of games.
So that was spring, summer, and then fall was 79 games. Okay. So by the time I talked to you at the football game, was he still playing baseball?
Yes. Yeah, we were in football season playing baseball.
So you were in games 70 through 79.
Correct. Yeah, we were on the
good. And this is where I start to struggle with, and I'm not blaming the coach, and this is where, for me, my frustration lies much more with the clubs. Like, when I look up the biggest reason people don't play, like, you can Google it right now. Number one reason people don't play in college is burnout. Like, it's you can look on Google. That's not even a little known fact. Like, burnout's a big deal. I talk to kids all the time, and the number one reason they say they don't play in college is burnout. So if this is such a well-known fact that kids are burning out, too much competition, too much training, too many games, clubs have to know this. And to me, the one thing a club can control is the amount of games that are being played, the amount of training that's being done. Like, if they're aware of the facts, then to me, I don't understand how a club doesn't say, hey, fifth grade, here's about the amount of games. Here's a range. You can play 30. If you're with our club, you can play 30 to 35 games. You can play 35 to whatever it is, and I don't have magical numbers. I know the magical number is a lot less than 79. A lot. Like, that's the part where it's like 79 is excessive. to the point where it becomes destructive. And if a club's there to nurture and develop players, which is what their mission statement is, burning them out seems to go against kind of what they're doing. So his fifth grade year, it's 79 games. So then you decided maybe that was a bit much. Like,
yeah, we had that conversation about burnout.
Yeah.
Like you have a unique position in that at the time you're not afraid to go against the grain. I think that's
not much. No,
pretty well known about you. And so in every aspect of life, and so against the grain in this, you were able to share your experience with Ty, and at the time, Ty had already committed to Mizzou. This was before the winter had hit, and so you were sharing with me the scenarios of the multiple students that would come in, student athletes that would come into your classroom, because you have direct day-to-day contact with these student athletes. Most parents don't have that with their own kid, and you were having that daily, and these conversations would happen often, and you weren't afraid to ask them these questions, and you were hearing a lot about burnout, and you were hearing about, and I was seeing it myself in really good athletes that would come through high school, and 20 years ago, certainly 30 years ago, these kids would have gone on to play Division III, Division II, some junior college, something. They would have gone on and played, but they were saying they were done because they were burnt out. And that was something that struck me, because that you spend all this time and invest all this energy in scheduling and everything, and then you come to the end of this when it's supposed to be getting really, really fun. Yeah. And then you say, no, we're done.
And that's the frustrating part. Like, the fun games that really, state championship games in high school are awesome. Watching college, well, I was hoping to see my son play in college, but watching college, like watching them play at the higher levels, I promise you it's more fun than watching 5U at Ellisville, or like fifth grade, 12U, 10U, little ones. Not that those aren't great games. Very riveting. The pitching's tremendous. But I promise you, the Final Four, and I've been able to go to it many times. I got lucky enough to go with my son. Those are awesome. Like, the thought of, and it was what drove me. It's what I shared with, and I've shared with you guys. Like, it was always, I wanted my son to enjoy playing when it mattered, when it meant more than, hey, I got a medal at Ponds. Nothing against Ponds, except the parking. Not a fan of the parking, but I'm sure they'll extend that at some. Anyway, good concession stand. Anyway, so with Asher, he's got 79 games. Did you see him start to get tired of playing? Like, what was his attitude towards going to games and practices?
Yeah, Asher's a pretty low-key kid. He's not, if it's time for a game or time for practice, he's not going to whine about it. He's not going to cry about it. He's not going to come out and tell me, Dad, I don't want to go. Those words I don't think would ever come out of his mouth. He understood that his expectation when he signed up for the team was to be there. Again, that was the era that we came into.
Absolutely.
And so he's never outright told me, no, I don't want to go, or Dad, I'm too tired, or whatever. But reading body language and just being smart about how to evaluate your kid and how much fun are they having? How much joy do you see in their eyes whenever they're doing these things that are supposed to be really joyful?
It's a game,
and it was, in fact, so maybe it was a week or two later, the second pivotal conversation that we had was just a comment that you made. You came to watch Asher play one of the fall baseball games. And you and Amy were walking up, and you shared with me this conversation that you had with Amy. As you were walking up to the field, you had said to Amy, how many fall baseball games do you think Ty played? And you both came up with a number. And I think when you told me that you came up with a number, my response to you was, I can tell you this, it's significantly less than mine, because I couldn't tell you how many games we played in the fall even come close. Yeah. And I think the number you said was like 3 or something really, really ridiculously low, right? It was at the time through his, whatever, Little League through 12U or whatever it was.
5U through 17U, I think he may have played, 3 to 5 fall ball games ever.
So here's a kid who I know didn't play fall ball, and he, at the time, this was before all the winter stuff happened with Ty, at the time was already one of the top prospects in the area before the winter months had happened, and he went even further. So he had already committed to a D1 SEC school and never played a fall ball league or a tournament for that matter, but maybe played in 3-4 games, whatever.
No fall or winter training, no fall ball.
So for me, the fear was struck down in that moment of, you mean if a kid's good enough to be able to play that way, then he's not going to fall behind. And I'm not saying my son is going to be genetically at a level that Ty was. There's no way you can predict any of that. No. But you can put boundaries in place to say we're not going to go through this process and be crazy about it, when the reality is there's so much more to it than how many games and how many reps and how much time you spend at a baseball park, field, whatever.
And that's what I think. And I mean, I've thought a lot about it. I mean, to me, it comes down to playing college. You need talent. I mean, there's no way you can get around. You need genetics. Talent plays a part. You need work ethic so you get the most out of the talent you've been given. And those two things are things that are out of my control for my son, out of your control for Asher. Like, as an athlete, it's up to that athlete. He's got the talent. Is he going to get the most out of it? So for me, if it's a club going, these are two things that every athlete needs to play in college, the one thing that a club can control is the amount they're doing it. Because if they're doing it too much, then all that talent goes to waste because they burn out and don't play. So that's where I wish clubs would focus more on what can we do to make sure that it's fun, make sure that when they say develop, they're developing a love for the game more than they're developing the ability to hit a slider. Because if it's fun, they're going to work at it on their own. When they play too much, they're going to stop working. And that's like when I share my son didn't play fall ball or do winter trainings, it's not out of, hey, look, my son got drafted and he did it's out of, hopefully, like with Tim, it's understanding you're able to be successful without adding all this other stuff. Like, you don't have to do the winter training. You don't have to. Development comes from really coaching more than anything. Like, physically, you're going to develop just as you go. But coaching is what changes things. And if you have the same coach in the spring, same coach in the summer, and you haven't developed by the fall, why do you think in the fall that coaching is going to make you any better when it's the same coaching you just had? I'm sorry, I get logical occasionally, and that just doesn't make sense to me. To me, in the fall, if you want to get better and you really want to do things, if you have an opportunity to work with like a P3 or a different hitting coach, and you want to go take lessons to refine what you're doing, I'm all for it. I'm just not for traveling around all fall, spending money, time, playing more games that aren't going to change things. But I know that's the system we're in, and honestly, it's a stupid system. So, sorry. No, I'm not. I'm not sorry. It is a stupid system. But anyway, you get all fired up when we start talking about people getting burnt out. But we had the conversation. You decided that you were going to try to set some boundaries and see how it played out for Asher. So you're one of the few people that I've had this conversation with that changed things, and they actually have a way to compare the two. So what did that conversation go like with the coach, and then what the season looked like for Asher?
Yeah, and I would say I don't know that any of this creates a recipe for how you're supposed to do things.
No, to
your point, like, you can't create a recipe to have a D1 athlete. Right, it just doesn't work that way, right? And so you can have a recipe that sets your family up for success, that sets your kids up for success, that allows your kid to get the most out of what they might be able to do.
Yeah.
And so those are things that you helped me clarify as we had these conversations. And so we had this conversation. This was at the end of the fall. On the other side of that coin was I had also seen my daughter, who I think had just finished up she was moving into her sophomore year of high school, and she had stopped playing club volleyball after her 8th grade year. So she made the freshman volleyball team, made the JV volleyball team her sophomore year, but she hadn't played club volleyball the last 2 years. And Timberlands likes to share often that it's a really hard high school team to make. Yeah. And it is. I think there were like 80 girls that tried out or something, and they take 10, their freshman year. And crazy. So it's an unbelievable amount of girls. And so Karis, if she's here, she would tell you she's not a D1 athlete. She's D1 in many other things, but not as an athlete.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
And there's nothing wrong with that. And so, but she works really hard.
Yeah.
And she competes at a high level. And I can almost guarantee that if she's going to be in a practice or on a court or on a field, that she's going to be one of the top hard workers out there, because that's what she's learned in doing it. But her club experience was not very good. And so we were wise enough to help make a decision to not continue that path and do what brings you joy and lets you have fun. And so there's always that fear of falling behind. There's always, well, what if she had done that? Would she have been able to make varsity or whatever the case may be? And possibly, but
is it worth it?
Is it worth it? That's the big question. And so that all of that, seeing that through, brought me to a conversation at the end of the fall of what will this look like? Because on top of that, as we were wrapping that up, there was a push from the club to do hit labs or pitching training, and these were for 11U, right? Yeah. So 11-year-olds. So, we finished small break in July, like 2 or 3 weeks in July, rolled right into August, and you pick up on league games and fall, practices and fall baseball. And so then middle October, we're done with our fall ball season, but by November, it's already talked about like the individual training that you're going to be getting.
Yeah.
Hit labs and pitching training and what are you going to be doing to be ready to roll for team training starting in January. So Asher plays a high level basketball. He has, since he was in 2nd grade, he was recruited because we played against the team, and the coach says, I want him to play on this.
It's a whole nother club.
Club. Different. It's a modified club.
Yeah.
Because you're dealing with every parent on that, aside from one, had played college basketball.
A little different perspective, yeah.
Much different perspective. So everyone kind of pulls back the reins on that. So there's a limited season. And these kids are all multi-sport kids.
So people that all played in college realize you should have a limited season.
You should have a limited season.
It's crazy.
And there's value in playing more than one sport. And so
that's a thinker.
And so that's been a modified club sport for us. And so, but it's a high level. And so for the winter, he's playing high level basketball. And there's not much room for anything else during the winter season.
And there shouldn't be.
There shouldn't be. And that's where we want his focus to be. And so it led me into having this conversation. So, just asked if I could meet up. And I felt like this was better done in person rather than on the phone. Yeah. Because I truly believe that the coach that Asher still plays for cares about Asher deeply. Like, I think he wants the best for Asher from a coaching standpoint. Like, I think he wants, if you were to ask him, I think he loves Asher. He says great things about Asher, and he treats Asher with the utmost respect. And I love him for that. I'm appreciative.
That's why we're still there. Yeah.
That's why we're still there. Otherwise, we would have jumped ship in a heartbeat. And so met with him one-on-one, and he just heard me out as far as my concern with burnout. He saw Asher go through that season and struggle. He knew that was no surprise to him. Struggling for him was hitting. Hitting is hard. It's hard at any age. It was hard at 11 years old for Asher. And he had success otherwise. He's an extremely athletic kid. So you put him on the bases, he's going to be fine. You put him in the field, he's going to be fine.
Figure
put
it
him
out.
pitching, he was fine. Hitting was hard. And he struggled with that. And so
and sometimes just getting a break from when you're not playing 79 games. If you stop after 30, mentally you take a break. Like, that's what makes the MLB so hard. Is 162 games. There's no break, like, to reset. So at 11 years old, when you start to struggle, that can get away from you in a hurry.
And you had mentioned that break and the reset. Don't pick anything up. And Ty had gone through multiple breaks like that. And I thought, hey, if it worked for Ty, then maybe it might work for Asher too, right? Like it seemed like a pretty good logic. And so we had this conversation. Coach agreed, and that we would not touch a baseball through the 3 months, October, November, December. We would be as many of the team trainings as we could, which they had 2 a week. We made it to about 1 per week. And Asher he looked forward to those times. He enjoyed that.
Yeah.
That was a mental break away from basketball at the time. A lot of times, like what it is for him whenever he goes to shoot free throws during baseball season, it just shifts his mindset a little bit, right? And so he didn't. There was joy in his eyes whenever you would look at him. We would come back and like, hey man, how'd that feel? And you could see he was excited. He was talking about
which is what it should be at 11, 12. Not to be dumb, at 14, 15. Like there should be joy playing this game. Right? Like you're playing a game and you only get to do it for a limited amount of time. Correct. There should always be that joy. It shouldn't be, I have to hit again or shoot again or, sorry.
No, you're right. So when we had the conversation, there was also, for me, I wanted to draw a line in the sand to say, this is how many games I would like Asher to play. Regardless of we'll do the trainings, but we won't be able to play until April because basketball is going to go through March. So we won't play until April, and we want to be done by the end of June. And we're going to try to keep that under 40 games for this spring, which is still a lot of games, but it's less than 55. And so that's the conversation went surprisingly well. The coach was very receptive and ultimately said, I want what's best for Asher. And I truly believe that.
And that's what you hope a coach would say. Like anyone that truly cares about kids, which I think most coaches can. It's not that coaches are out there trying to burn kids out, but I think a lot of coaches are trying to keep up with, well, this club's doing this, so we have to play. Oh, they're going out of town, so we have to go out. Like, you're constantly trying to keep up, and in trying to keep up, it's that stampede of like, let's just run, let's just go, and all of a sudden it's like, our kids don't want to play anymore.
Right.
What happened? Well, you played 79 games in 5th grade. Not the coach's fault, just the system's fault of turning out, and the club not putting in boundaries to protect the coach and the kids. So you set the boundaries. He comes back in this spring and he starts playing. Did you see any differences between the 2 seasons that?
Yeah, night and day differences for us. There's always, it's hard for me to judge the season based on success. He was more successful. And so you could look at that and say, well, if he's more successful, of course he's going to have more fun. And that's true, right? But his body language, his confidence level, the coaches comment on it. Like he seems like a different person when he's out there on the mound. He seems like he's a different person when he's up there hitting.
He's just engaged.
He's there. He's engaged, and he's confident. And I think there was a big part of that. We've had multiple conversations with him afterward since this, and now trying to figure this out and talking through it.
It's a yearly thing.
But part of this is having conversations is just one part of it. You have to be able to recognize and read what your kid is telling you in the nonverbal cues, and that's a hard thing to do because I think when you ask every one of these parents, "Are you concerned about burnout?" What would you think their answer would be when they say, "Are you concerned about burnout?"
I've heard them say it. Well, no, my kid loves to play.
That's exactly what
they
say.
love to play.
Yeah,
and that's what I mentioned. The one
when they're not playing, they go play, right? Yeah. They're out hitting or they're out throwing or whatever. They love to play at the age 11 and 12. And one of the things that you say often to me is, if you let your kid eat candy every night instead of dinner, they'll do that because they love it, right?
Yes.
But eventually that's not going to be healthy for them or good for them.
The 11-year-old brain, obviously, I want to play, I want to do it, just giving into the wants of an 11-year-old doesn't seem, I'm around high school kids all day. If I just let them do what they want, that's a scary situation.
Correct.
And that's why as adults, we should, and again, clubs should recognize, well, just because a dad wants to play in this tournament or he wants to do that, a club, to me, with that perspective of like, man, we need to set some boundaries so that, hey, if you're with this club, we're only going to play 35, 40 games a summer. If you want to play 70, there's 69 other clubs that you can go sign up for.
True.
Like at some point, I would love anyone any club that would love to set boundaries, I'll come give you a hug myself. I'm not a hugger. I'm not that type of guy. But if you literally, just one club could step out and be like, hey, you know what? We're going to try this whole thing of like, let's set some boundaries, limit the amount of games, limit the amount of training, limit the stuff, not just because you want to, but because it's best for the kid. Like, you're preventing burnout, which is a big deal and it's a fact. Man, let me know. I'll come down. I'll give you a hug. I'm not going to buy you dinner, but just a hug. I would love to see that to someone. I really think if some of the bigger clubs would start to get on the same page, and I know last week with Jerry was talking about like it's a war. That's sad. It is not a war. It's youth baseball. Youth. Not major league, not professional, not college, not high school. Just youth baseball. Like little kids just wanting to play. And we've created the system that is hurting the families, hurting the kids, hurting, like, I can't believe a coach wants to coach 70. I've coached fifth graders. I don't want to coach them 79 times. I don't want to coach the high school kids 79 times. And I love those kids. One was mine. I don't want to coach my own kids 79 times. Nothing against my son. I love you, Titus. But we have to set some boundaries. So any club out there, just throwing down a challenge. Just talk about it. Think about it. Use some logic. Sorry, little tangent. I'm going to come back to Tim. Sorry, Tim.
It's all right. Yeah. No,
so his attitude and everything this summer.
Yeah, he ended up, the team played 52 games. He played 36.
36. He's okay?
And
no withdrawal symptoms?
No.
He's
did
good.
Not. You know, interesting. He ended up with pneumonia over the summer.
Well, that's
and
okay.
It was not good. And so he came in on a Friday. We were supposed to have a tournament that weekend, and that was one that we had already signed up for, that we were going to be available. He came in. He pitched, did great, came home, had a fever. Saturday had a fever. Text coach, hey, man, Asher's not going to be able to play. We'll see how he is. Maybe it's a 24-hour thing. Sunday, he's still not able to play. It was truly like the first time that he had shed tears. He was sick, and so maybe a little bit more in his feels, maybe. I don't know. But he was really upset. Like, not just like, oh, man, I'm not going to get to play. He was really upset because he knew that he had these limited weekends that he was going to be able to play, and he really –
it meant something.
Meant something to him that he wasn't going to be there that weekend. It was a cool moment for me to realize that not that he had pneumonia, but that he wanted to play.
I was going to question you about that.
No, that he wanted to play that much, and that he wanted to be there that weekend so much.
And I think that's something that we, growing up in our generation of like, we didn't have unlimited games. We didn't have unlimited tournaments. We didn't have unlimited. So we appreciate like when you got to play in a tournament, which was sparingly, the tournament meant something.
Right.
Like if you won a tournament, it's like, we won a tournament. Everyone's like, well, that's great. Now you win a tournament. No one cares because everyone, like every 5th, 6th, 7th grader, the amount of trophies in their room, by the way, they're useless. They're not going to get you on the high school team. They're not. You can put them in a box, bring them to the high school tryout. We don't care. Just to let you know, sorry, I know they're sparkly and shiny and they're wonderful, but they're not any sign of like you accomplished anything great outside of you showed up and someone won a game for you. Sorry. So he played 30-something games. He enjoyed it. So moving forward, and this is the tough part I think for me each year was like, okay, we agreed to this, but now we have fall ball coming up. Now we have winter trainings coming up. And it's the same conversations over and over.
Right.
Because it's on you to set the boundaries when to me it shouldn't be on parents to be setting boundaries for their kids. It should be the people that have the more information, the more experts in the room going, like the basketball situation. All of them played in college, or most of them played in college. They understand, hey, this is not the time to really go all in on this stuff. You can pull back and still have success. I'm just not understanding why the people that have that knowledge aren't going and sharing that with the people paying the money. Instead, it falls back on the parents and then to the coaches of like, well, how much do you want to play? How many uniforms do you want? Sorry. Just another one for you. You don't need 5 uniforms new every year. You don't. You do not need 3 pairs of pants, 8 shirts with different combinations and hats. It's just another expense not needed. I don't know why. Everyone's like, look at the pretty uniforms. What looks good is like when you play well. So just for fun, put some T-shirts on, go play well. No one will care what uniform you have on. Instead, you spend $300 or $400.
Then you would have more money to buy another sliding mitt or an arm sleeve.
The sliding mitts.
Something.
I love me a good sliding mitt.
Sorry.
It's okay. It's fine. My son's not wearing a sliding mitt. If you slide head first at the professional level, apparently my son told me, he may be lying to me, because the whole time I would never let him wear a mitt because I'm like, stop it. No mitts for you. But he got there, he's like, look, they make us wear it. I'm like, so when he gets home, we'll have the conversation. Maybe he's lying to me. Not that he's ever lied to me. It would be the first time. But no, he would not do such a thing. But anyway, the one thing, and you said this to me, and I think it was part of a conversation at some point that I was like, that's one of the best ways I've heard. Like when there's a difference between commitment and availability. Yeah. And I think that's something that for parents and players, they need to understand the difference between that. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, to your point, having this conversation over and over and over, I said at the very beginning of this, like, by no means do I feel like I have this thing figured out. It is just as confusing now as what it was a year ago or 2 years ago. Yeah. There's starting to be some clarity on, I know I need to do this. And so making sure, having these difficult conversations. And why are they difficult? I don't know why they're difficult. They shouldn't be. You feel like you're letting the team down. You feel like you're letting the coaches down. Whatever. I certainly don't feel like I'm letting my son or my family down, which should take priority, but you feel like you're letting some other people down, and so that makes the conversation difficult. But to your point, so wrapping up the season, we had this was not a face-to-face, this was a phone call conversation with the coach. Hey, where is Asher after that season? How did you feel about it?
Yeah.
Are you looking to do anything different, right? And the comment was made in that, again, Coach loves Asher to death, and this was not meant to be negative in any way, but it's just the language that we use when we're talking about this stuff. He questioned his commitment. He wasn't as committed as maybe some of the other players that did play all 52 games, right?
Which I understand the logic. I mean, that makes sense. Someone's there 52 games, someone's there 35.
That's the era that I grew up in, right? So if you weren't there for all the games, then you weren't committed.
Yeah.
And I just asked to push pause in the conversation. I want to clarify this word commitment versus an overprotective dad, but not really. But that's the language that I use. A dad who's just limiting his availability.
Yeah.
That has nothing to do with Asher's commitment. And here's how you know. When you're on a field together, you can look around and see who the most committed kids are on that field. It's the kids who are looking at coaches when they're talking, who are responding to coaches when they tell them to do something, who you don't have to tell to get out of the dugout door 1,000 times.
Any coach knows that kid.
Any coach knows the kid who's committed because he does what the coaches ask him to do at his best ability. He'll give 110% every time when he's on the field, right? And so Asher, for whatever reason, I think that's his mom, that's what he does. When he's there, he will give everything he's got, and he will listen to coaches. He'll do what the coaches ask him to do. He can't pick up his clothes out of his bedroom at home, but he can do those things to coaches really well. And so I'm proud of him for that, and I'm happy that he's that kind of person, and I hope that continues to carry on.
Yeah.
But that is not commitment. Is not being available. Commitment is when you're there, giving everything you've got.
You're fully engaged.
So there are many kids who are going to show up at every game and every practice, and they're not going to be fully engaged when they're there. And that's not commitment just because they're showing up, because their parents are doing that. Their parents are driving the kid there.
Dropping them off, putting you.
Correct.
And I think even going down the path a little more, it's impossible to be committed when you're playing fall baseball, you're playing basketball, and you're playing football. It's physically impossible to be committed to. He has to be at a football game on Saturday morning at 11, but there's a baseball game at 10. Well, to say you're not, and not that they said, but you're not committed because you're at football.
Right.
Well, I physically can't be in multiple like it's just not fair. So when you said that about availability is different than commitment, I 100% agree.
Yeah.
Like limiting availability doesn't mean my son was not committed to playing. It just meant for me and my family, we were more committed to our family time. We were more committed to other things.
Or protecting,
setting
family
boundaries
time.
to make sure that we were doing what we were supposed to do. So last thing I have on here, and I'm just curious, like, you've gone through this for years. You went through it with your daughters in volleyball and basketball, and then Asher. Like, are there any lessons that kind of stand out of, like, this is what you've learned through this process? And I mean, that's a lot. There's a lot of things, but just some thoughts of, like, hey, it's different because I'm kind of through it and I have a different perspective. But coming from a parent that's going through it now.
Yeah, there's a lot of lessons. Ultimately, this is a confusing process.
Absolutely.
And it's okay to just say that it's a confusing process, and the clubs aren't helping make it any less confusing, right? And so it's a stampede, it's feeding the beast, the machine, or whatever that's already rolling, and how to pull back on that, I think starts just with having real conversations. Yeah. And if there's a lesson learned or something that I would encourage parents to truly think about it, or not just think about, talk to your high school coaches, talk to the high school teachers that are involved with student athletes, and ask them what their opinion is on burnout for kids in sports. What is their opinion on it? Because collectively across the board, man, this is something that's really happening. And to say that your kid loves it enough that they won't be burnt out, it's just not true. And they all start out loving it until they don't, right?
And
every kid loves it until they don't.
You're not burnt out until you are.
Correct.
And then once you are, it's over.
Then you don't get a second chance. And so having that conversation with people that may know more about this process
and
than
unbiased.
And just ask them what. And so my question would be, are you concerned about burnout? If you are, what are you doing about it, right? And if you're not, why not? You need to have more conversations outside your little circle. That would be the lessons that I've learned.
And that's what I think. That's exactly what I'm saying. That's what the reason I want to have Tim on the show was just that. Like, he was a college athlete. It's not like he doesn't understand what it takes to be successful in athletics. Like, it's not. He has a background, and for him to struggle through it is really difficult. As a friend, and I've known Tim quite a while, to like see him go through it and see Asher and Karis and like, it's tough to watch people you care about go through this. And what it comes down to at the end of the day, it's their decisions and them realizing or them making the adjustments. Just like anyone watching, it's up to you. You can set the boundaries you want. Everyone has their own path, and unfortunately, there is no A plus B equals C in this. It is, you have to figure out what's most important to you and make your decisions from there. And that's a family decision, that's conversations. But you players out there that are watching, if you're struggling and like getting to the point where you're not enjoying it, it's better to have the conversation with your parents right now, with your coaches right now, with the club right now, as you start to struggle with motivation to do it, and understand it's normal. Mm-hmm. The expectations on you as a 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, whatever grade, if you're starting to get tired of it, stop. Like, you can have that conversation because your parents want what's best for you. Like, your parents and the clubs aren't just trying to just keep throwing you out there without caring. They do want the best for you, but sometimes I don't think the voices of the athletes are heard. And that's what part of the show is, hopefully trying to bring awareness of, like, there's a lot of athletes that I talk to every day that are struggling with, Coach, I don't want to do this anymore. And before it gets to that point, please have those talks. So I appreciate you coming on, Tim. I loved having it, and I hopefully it'll help someone listening. Yeah. And
thanks for having me, and thanks for the conversations. Really, you're in a unique perspective because you have so much access to it, and this is a message that needs to be heard from athletes, from parents, from clubs. And I hope that because of your position that you're in, having seen Titus go through this and end up in a really high level, there's not many people that can have that behind them as they're stating these facts, right? And I really appreciate the conversations I've had with you. Thanks.
I appreciate you listening, because I deal with high school kids all day. I tell them things, they don't listen. I don't know why. But anyway, I really appreciate you watching. Hopefully you got something out of it. If you did, you can actually send the link to other people that might need to hear it. I mean, just for fun. Just, hey, if you got a coach that means well, that maybe you're like, man, I wish someone would tell them maybe it's a little too much, blame me. It's okay. I'm okay with it. Next week, Jerry Daniels is back, and we are going to talk specifics about kind of why clubs are doing some of the things they're doing, especially within the realm of development, kind of the role and how they see why there's fall ball, why there's winter training, why they're doing some of the things they're doing. And hopefully you get better understanding from Jerry, because he is the godfather of club baseball here in St. Louis. Like, he's been around for a while. So hopefully his perspective helps you out. Appreciate you watching. I'll see you next week.